The defense has played very well so far through the first 6 games, but how well have they played? We'll talk about it.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black, the editor and publisher of Eagle Insider. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get yourself started. This is our last day of bye week. Definitely one of my least favorite weeks of just content creation, but we've had a fun week. And to end it, as every Friday, we have Mitchell Wolf of Eagle Insider on. Mitch, how's it going?
It's going good. I honestly disagree. I love the bye week because then I can look at other stuff and not just have to cram in a game, rewatch, and then cram in, preparing for their opponent. Actually get some time to breathe and review some stuff. So I actually really like it. I'm glad there's 2 bye weeks.
Actually, yeah. I mean, the grind slows down a little bit for us, but Let's today we're going to talk about the defense. This is something Mitch wanted to come on and talk about. I talked about the offense, talked about Castellanos a little bit earlier this week, but I want to talk about the defense because it's been a kind of a divisive group or unit to the fan base, as some people have been very impressed, others are frustrated. And Mitch, let's start off your thesis with what your thoughts are on this defense so far.
I think my frustration, people's frustration, is that for the last few years, people were upset at Jeff Hafley and his defensive scheme for what it was doing and how it was struggling, especially later in the season and especially at the end of last season. And Tim Lewis comes in and he brings in this defense that is very different schematically from what Jeff Hafley was doing in terms of using a lot more zone coverage, not blitzing. And people are still upset with the results, even though the results are demonstrably better. So I've been preparing this article for the site where I'm comparing the stats from the first 6 games of this year to last year. And so we'll just go with some of the basic ones. So last year, BC allowed 28.3 points per game, and that was 86 in the FBS. It was 52nd among 69 Power 5 teams. This year, they're allowing 17.2 points per game, which is 22nd in the FBS, and that's out of 134 teams, and it's 21st among Power 5 teams, which is, again, out of 70 teams. So that's a really good number. Total yards allowed. Last year, 385. This year, 321. 60 yards of difference. They're allowing more passing yards, but I think that's more a function of the opponents they played, especially last year when they were playing teams like Army and UConn and all these teams that were just running the ball a lot. And then rushing yards allowed per game. Last year, they allowed 187.9 rushing yards per game. That was 121st and 67th in the Power 5. So third from the last. This year, they're only allowing 104.7 rushing yards per game, which is 26th in the FBS and 20th in the Power 5. So those basic numbers, all really good. They're better on third downs, 41.4% versus 36.6%. Their defensive red zone efficiency is crazy because last year, BC, and red zone efficiency is the percent of red zone drives that turn into touchdowns. Last year, BC was 132nd in the FBS, 81.4%, and 69th in the Power 5 teams, dead last. This year, they are third in FBS at 25% and third in the Power 5, which is, again, out of 70 teams. They're crushing that. And that's probably going to normalize as the season goes on. That's going to get worse, but it's not going to be dead last in the FBS. So, we talk about this bend, don't break defense. And we'll see what happens with Amari Jackson, see how long he's going to be out. That's a question mark. But what this defense is doing is playing winning football. They are not allowing teams to run the ball very well. We've seen halves where there's been blips, like the first half against Missouri and towards the end of the Virginia game. But we've seen them be able to do this to keep teams in bad down distance situations, which force them into worse situations when they're in third and long. And that's winning football. And granted, yes, they're allowing teams to get into the red zone too much. I'll stipulate to that. They're actually I don't have this. I should have had the stat pulled up. I thought I did. But they are they're closer to the bottom in that, which is a problem. But they're also very high on points per drive, a down set conversion rate, which is how often a new set of downs gets converted into another set of downs or a touchdown. So all of these numbers are improved. And if you go into the analytics, which we're going to talk with Parker Fleming, Stats of War next week, defensive success rate this year, 65.2%, which is 11th. Last year, 56.9, which was 93rd. defensive EPA per game, 9.1 this year, 18th in the FBS. Last year, negative 8.09, which was 115th. That's almost 20 points of difference in EPA per game, which is crazy. The biggest is naturally in defensive rushing EPA per game, which is this year it's 6.09, which is 18th. It was negative 2.19 last year, which is 118th. So that's a touchdown and a 2-point conversion almost difference, where basically because BC is keeping teams in bad down and distance situations, they're decreasing the likelihood that they're going to score. And again, it's because of a wholesale schematic change in what Tim Lewis is doing versus what Jeff Hafley is doing, and it's preventing these big explosive plays. And granted, let me see if I can pull up the explosive play stats I have. They are better. They're not extremely different, except in explosive run rate allowed, but they're a good bit better. And again, they're bowing up in the red zone, which is and at a crazy rate. It's going to normalize and get a little worse, but they're probably still going to be pretty good. So I'm not sure like why people are upset about this defense when they are playing winning football, especially when they're not given short fields to defend by turnovers from the offense.
So I had two really quick thoughts about this. Earlier this week on Eagle Insider, I wrote an article about superlatives, and one of the things, and Mitch, I had texted you about this. I was copying an idea that the Illinois site had written, and they had given their top transfer for offense and top transfer for defense. Top transfer for offense wasn't that hard. It was Trayshawn Ward. And then for defense, I was looking and going, man, Jeff Hafley brought a lot of guys in. None of them have really done anything. This is exactly the same team, basically, other than
Elijah Jones.
Yeah, that's it. And every other guy has been coached up by Tim Lewis and this team to play at a higher level. I mean, that's the only way I can look at it, right?
Yeah, I mean, people get all mad. They're like, "Oh my God, Jeff Hafley mismanaged his roster. Jeff Hafley was so bad at this, doing that." And then Tim Lewis comes in, and he's doing all this with Jeff Hafley's players, who apparently people say Jeff Hafley couldn't develop either. And like, look at what's happened. I mean, I'm kind of gonna put Ezeraku and Cam Horsley out of this discussion because Ezeraku's an elite player and he's taken a huge progression. Cam Horsley's, and they've both been around a while. So they're kind of set pieces, but a guy like Davian Crouch, the two safeties, like compared to the two safeties last year, it's a completely different world. And the rest of the secondary is playing pretty well. Like again, that was the big question mark going into the season, and they were not a light. And when I talk about this, unless you are like a Georgia, and even this happens to Georgia and Alabama, your secondary is going to get beat sometimes. It's especially at BC. Like we say all these things, it's like we're talking about Boston College. We're not talking about Georgia or Alabama. We're talking about a team that is usually going to be operating at a talent disadvantage, especially against a team like Missouri, which we saw, or you're going to be about equal with the teams in your conference. So, I feel like the expectations are just always so high where it's like, oh my God, why aren't they shutting down every offense? Like, because this is Boston College. This isn't Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State. Like, they're going to let up some things, and that's just kind of how football is played. So again, these players that were struggling last year and, were not as consistent, they are performing a lot better most of the time this year with Tim Lewis being the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and I go back to this this is just a little joke, but like I think 2015 again rears its ugly head as like the worst thing that BC could have happened to them, because I think people looked at the defensive play there when it was like an all-world defense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
and they're like, why can't you do that every time? And it's like it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, that is an outlier of outliers. Like I feel like at one point I tried to look for this, but like I don't think there are very few teams you can find that have that kind of dichotomy where again the offense is just completely inept and the defense is like was a top 5 defense in college football. Now, again, if you look at the entire history of Boston College, they've probably never been a top 5 defense ever beside that season. Probably not even a top 10, not even a top 20. So again, I think there needs to be, as always, it needs to be a resetting of expectations. And then you say, okay, this, what they have, they're doing really well with. Like they are, if you look at the analytic things that I mentioned, even most of the counting stats, this is like a top quarter defense in the FBS, and it's like one of the better ones in the Power 5. So, and we'll see how these numbers kind of normalize when we're looking at games against teams like SMU, Louisville versus, Duquesne and an inept Florida State team. But instead of starting at the middle or near the bottom, we're starting near the top. It's like, okay, this is going to normalize, and it's probably going to end up somewhere in the average and ideally in the above average category. So I think this defense has been far and away the more consistent unit of the three. special teams have been consistently bad. Offense has been up and down. Defense has been really consistent outside of like a few halves. And again, I think that a big part of the reason where they struggle is when the offense has a turnover and they only have 50 or 40 yards to defend, and that's usually when they've allowed touchdowns.
How has the missed tackles been? Do you have stats on that
Yes, I
too?
do. So last year, BC's missed tackle rate was 15%, which was 80th in the FBS and 44th in the Power 5. This year, it's down to 12.7%, which is 25th in the FBS and 15th in the Power 5. So that's a big jump too, and that's a big part of it. And that's, again, if you want to talk about coaching, that's a coaching point where they are being more physical in practice, being more disciplined about lanes, and again, people miss tackles. Look at the NFL; people miss tackles every week.
Yep.
It's gonna happen. Like, this is not a perfect team we're talking about where they're never gonna make a mistake. These things are gonna happen. Sometimes they're gonna be better athletes on the opposite side of the field. It happens. So yeah.
All right. In a moment, I'm going to talk with Mitch about players that have stepped up and players that need to take a next step, and maybe some of his thoughts about what needs to happen with this team moving forward. We'll talk all about that in just a moment. ZBiotics pre-alcohol prebiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered prebiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this pre-product down. Just remember to take ZBiotic your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel better the next day. Every time I have a pre-alcohol before drinks, I notice a big difference next day. I don't feel, the foggy headaches. My stomach feels a ton better. And even after a night out, I can confidently plan on being able to do my podcast, do my work without worry. Now, go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a punch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Now, this is our fun little segment of the night. Mitch and I are going to go over our 3 picks of the week. Mitch, what is our first game of the week?
This is a big week, big weeks. And honestly, kind of happy that BC isn't playing so we can just appreciate these games. So, First one, obviously, Red River Shootout. That's what I call it. That's its name. Get over it. Texas, Oklahoma. Texas is #1 in the country. Oklahoma is 18. Oklahoma's getting 14.5 points. I think Texas wins this one easily, but I'm going to hedge because Red River games are always weird. Oklahoma, no matter how bad, I think there's one game a few years ago where Texas kind of blew them out because Oklahoma just had a weird year, but almost every other year they have a plan, and I think Oklahoma covers 14.5.
I'm going to agree with you here because one of my betting rules, and if you're going to me for betting rules, you're in trouble. But I do agree, and I think I heard it on a podcast, and I forget which one it was. Dan Rubenstein and Ty Hildenbrand.
Solid Verbal.
Solid Verbal.
Yeah.
That whenever there's a rivalry, always go with go against the spread,
especially if you're getting double digits and 2 touchdowns. Yeah,
I'm gonna go with Oklahoma here.
All right, next one we got 2 versus 3. Ohio State at Oregon. Oregon getting 3.5 points at home. Man, I think I'm going to go with Ohio State here. I think they're a lot better than Oregon. I think they've been holding back a lot of stuff on offense, so that Oregon might not be prepared for. Chip Kelly's just been in the lab cooking up. This is obviously a revenge game for him. Oregon, they beat Oregon State by a lot. But even then they had trouble with Michigan State. They've just not been clicking. So I'm going to go with Ohio State here.
I'm going to go with the home team. Okay. I'm going to go with Oregon at home. Oregon at home is, especially in big games, is a weird place to play.
That's true.
Dylan Gabriel, I think, will have a big enough game to keep this close enough. I'm going to go with the Ducks.
They're really juicing that spread for Oregon. It's -120 odds at +3.5, which is crazy. All right, last game we're going to do is Ole Miss LSU, 9 versus 13 in Death Valley. Again, home dog getting 3.5 points. I'm gonna go with LSU here. I think Ole Miss can definitely win. I think this one's gonna be close. I think this is like I really think this is like gonna be an overtime game where it's just a shootout, tons of points. I'm not sure who. I think either team could win, like I said, but I think this stays within a field goal. So I would take LSU plus 3.5.
I'm gonna agree with you here. After Ole Miss loss recently, I think I was waiting for like a Lane Kiffin revenge game here, but man, Death Valley is a tough place to play.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I still think Ole Miss wins, but like because LSU has just not looked that impressive. You know, they've had some kind of weird games, but yeah,
mm,
I think that environment is really special. The game is at 2:50. Well, no, 3:15 local time, so it's going to be pretty warm down there.
LSU, that should be a night game. That seems just
That's what LSU
screams.
wants every home game to be a night game because of how hot it gets. Oh, we're in
Yeah,
mid-October, so maybe it won't be that
I
bad.
mean, just Death Valley at night. It just
Oh
seemed like
yeah.
that'd be a perfect night game though.
Mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm,
after a day of watching a bunch of college football games, but
mm-hmm.
whatever. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. You can get yourself started with FanDuel with a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black. Hope you guys are enjoying our little new segment. We kind of added it back in there. We're not keeping track on our bets this year, but hopefully you're enjoying that. Now, Mitch, let's talk a bit about like the individual players who has stood out to you. I mean, other than Donovan Azaraku.
I mean,
We're not going to talk about Donovan.
We could do a whole episode just on him.
Yeah, but who else? Like, I know you had some thoughts going into this season. Are there players that have stood out to you, or players that have really kind of wowed you?
Yeah, I mean, Cam Horsley has been an absolute animal in run defense. Not a huge producer in the pass rush area, but I mean, he's just been stellar in run defense, and he's a huge part of that improvement in that area for this entire defense.
Mm.
With that, I mean, the other guy who I honestly think is the third best player on this defense is strong safety KB Price. I think he's been awesome, really reliable tackler, can do a lot. He's only been targeted, I think, 18 times and allowed 5 receptions this year. Like he's been super great against tight ends. Rarely allows a catch. Plays physical, but plays smart. Again, aside from that defensive delay game penalty, which I watched it back and I understood why, but it's just kind of like I don't think we need to call this when he's clearly making an audible. So, anyways, but he's been really impressive, especially again, like I said, a position that we were really concerned about going into the season. And then same goes for Carter Davis. He hasn't been as good, but I've still been pretty impressed by what he's doing as a redshirt freshman who hasn't played much. Cam Arnold has looked good. Not as many mistakes as he's had in the past. We'll still one or two, and then maybe miss tackle here and there. But that's again, it's going to happen. Linebackers around the ball a lot. Davian Crouch has been pretty good. He plays really fast, so he has some missed tackles. But I think he's playing instinctive, and I like to see that. Kari Johnson has been very good in the nickel. I mean, especially compared to the other guys who have played there who have really struggled. I mean, he's been fantastic. Obviously, had the pick 6 against Duquesne, had another reception against West Kentucky, and as a nickel, he really is good at playing the run, which is something you need from your slot defender. You need them to be able to be willing to come downhill, make tackles, take on blocks, and he's very good at that. So those are the guys that have stood out to me in a positive way.
Let's do it. Let's call it the Jack Conley Memorial Award.
Oh,
what
geez.
player? No, I'm just kidding. If there's a Conley listening, I'm just kidding.
We're
not going to do that. What player do you think maybe isn't doing what they need to, or might be in jeopardy of losing their start? Is there anyone that you're like?
I don't know about losing their starting jobs, but the two that come to mind are George Brooks and Neto Akpala. Akpala still is just kind of having those issues with the missed tackles and the missed sacks. He does make a lot more positive plays this year than in the years past, where it's kind of just negative ones. Like this year, there are some nice tackles for loss, some good pressures, but still you're just seeing these missed tackles and not getting enough pressure. And I've talked about this team not getting enough pressure in general, and a big part of that's because it's basically just Donovan Azaraku. Like nobody else is really getting pressure anywhere near as consistently. And again, I don't want to hold anybody to Donovan Azaraku's performance standard, but we got to have a little more here. And same thing goes for George Brooks, who honestly just hasn't done a lot, period. He had the sack that he got ran into against Florida State. But other than that, he's been getting worked in run defense. Like when teams double team him, he is and he's a smaller defensive tackle, so it's going to happen, but he's getting washed out by double teams, not making a ton of impact plays. And you need an interior pass rush to help out, which Horsley's giving. That's why you have Rooks on the field, as somebody who's a little more agile, can move a little better, and he's just not really doing that right now. So those are the two guys. I'm not going to say they need to, but like if Amari Jackson is going to miss extended time, it looks like Ashton McShane is probably going to be the guy to take his spot. So true freshman cornerback, it's a tough ask, and I'm not going to I'm not going to be too tough on him because it's going to be difficult. But that could get a little dicey in the next few weeks.
I go back to this transfer portal class, and we were looking at like the depth of the defensive back, and Ryan Turner and Bryquise Brown have not really done much of anything.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Brown a few times the first few weeks, and then he's basically just been completely absent. He's been completely surpassed by McShane. Turner had some nice plays in the Duquesne game, and then got torched against Michigan State. So just not super impressive there. Cam Martinez is like, I don't want to be too mean, but I feel like he's been the worst player on this defense. Who's been like a consistent player. Like he has just been getting beat. He's missing tackles. It's just bad. So yeah, those guys have been, like, frankly, just been very disappointing. So
spoiler alert: my defensive transfer of the first half is Sedarius McConnell, because that's all I got.
There's not a ton of better options. I kind of, I'm not sure if you talked about this, but they're having this they're having this scrimmage for the guys who play a little less on Saturday. And I'm kind of hoping that some of the guys that only really played against Duquesne, they impress, and then maybe they can get some snaps. Like, I want to see, like, if George Rooks isn't going to give you that interior pass rush on passing downs, let's see if Ty Clemens or Gilbert Tungrangu can give you something, because they're a little smaller. But if you need a pass rusher, like, try to get those guys in the field. Josiah Griffin, same thing. Get a little more juice on the field in those situations, because you need somebody else besides Ezra who's doing yeoman's work. He's doing everything possible, more than can be asked of him. But you need other people to start stepping up and performing.
All right, in our final segment, I'm going to ask Mitch. I did my predictions for the last 6 games. I want to hear his predictions. We'll get into all that in just a moment. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual, with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privilege of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Again, it's sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black, and we are wrapping things up here with Mitchell Wolf. When we return on Monday, we're going to have, is it Monday's show that we're going to have Parker?
I think we're recording on Monday.
Oh, so Tuesday show, we're going to have Parker Fleming of Stats of War on Twitter. We had him on last year. We're going to have him on again. This guy is fascinating. If you like statistics, he's going to give us some good stuff. We're going to preview Virginia Tech. I have a Virginia Tech podcaster on. We don't have a Locked On Hokies, so it's another podcast. I think it's Sons of Saturday that I'll have on. And Mitch and I will talk again about the Hokies game before Thursday, because it's going to come up quickly. Now, Mitch, 6 more games are coming up. I want to give you a chance to tell us what your predictions are for the end of the season.
All right, so after the bye week, go on the road to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech has looked a little bit better since they kind of started off rough. Have that tough loss to Miami where they took them down to the wire. I don't think that was a catch, but interception by them, or I guess it was a touchdown by them, but whatever it was. I don't think they won that game, but they held tough with Miami, which is impressive. But I don't think BC wins that game. Lane Stadium has been a house of horrors for them. I think it'll be a good game. I think BC will hang tough, but I just think that that's a very tough place to play, and I don't think they come out of there with a win. Come back home the next week against Louisville. I think that's a loss too. I think Louisville's a good team, probably a little worse than last year, but BC is probably better than they were when they faced Louisville last year. But I think BC will give them a fight, but I just think Louisville has too much talent. So I think BC loses that one. Another bye week. I think that they get off the schneid there, beat Syracuse at home. I'm very skeptical of Syracuse. They've had their wins have come against Ohio at home, Holy Cross at home, and home against Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech was a 3-point win. UNLV was a 3-point win on the road in overtime. They've got some tough ACC games coming up. I think that BC can kind of keep their losing streak going. I think BC wins that one. That's the bounce back game. Then on the road at SMU, this is a tough one to pick because I do think that BC is probably better, but I think going on the road and that team is starting to round into form too. I think BC loses that one. That's a game where kind of the rails could come off. The game could go off the rails with the defense because they've got a pretty explosive offense. Then 2 home games to close out the season versus North Carolina versus Pitt. I think they take UNC. I think UNC is going to be pretty checked out by then. They're really, I don't think Mac Brown will be out. I think they'll respect him enough to let him finish out the season, but I think he'll be gone at the end of the year. So I think BC wins that one. Game at home against Pitt after Thanksgiving is a tough one because I think Pitt has kind of benefited from not really playing anybody so far. And they don't have a very tough schedule the rest of the year either. Going into the season, I was wrong on Pitt. I thought they were going to be really bad, but that offense is really clicking. Again, I think they'll kind of hit some bumps in the road in the coming weeks. I will pick them to lose that game. So I'm going to say BC finishes 6-6. I think going into the year, we said kind of in that 5-7, 6-6, 7-5 range. And I think some of these games will be close. It would not shock me if they went the other way because of like we saw with this Virginia game, the game flipped on essentially 2 or 3 plays in the final quarter. So, it wouldn't shock me. BC won one of these games. I would be kind of surprised if they did end up losing enough where they do finish 5-7. But I think they'll get some things figured out in the coming weeks. It'll be a little rough to watch in these next 2 games, but I do have faith in this coach to have to get things corrected. I think they'll look better in the final month of the season and be bowl eligible and not have to worry about getting in 5-7. You're muted.
Thank you. There you go. There's Mitch's predictions. I'm trying to be better. Folks were telling me they could hear my breathing with my new microphone, so I was like, I'm trying to hit the mute button, and it's at 10:30 at night recording this. I make mistakes. Anyways, Mitch, beginning of the season, you said 5-7. I've had some fans taunting you in my my inbox, but you're going up to 6-6. So
yeah, and again, like I said, and I think I was kind of on this train in the preseason. Like, there's going to be a few games that are going to be really close, and like they could flip it. And it's sometimes these games they just come down to a handful of plays. And like I said, with this team where you're not operating with a super big talent advantage, every play becomes that more valuable where it can really turn a game. So that's where, and that's like sometimes like a team will be better than the record indicates because you have these kind of fluke things that happen. You win or lose 1-score games, kind of like how BC was last year. But like Bill Parcells, you are what your record says you are. And like I said, I think they'll be 6-6, and I think they'll finish with some positive momentum going into the offseason.
All right, Mitch, we're gonna have you back on Tuesday for Parker, and we'll have you on next week as well, probably Wednesday, to preview what Virginia Tech because it's a Thursday game next week. Any things you want to plug before you get out?
Nope. You can just follow me on Twitter at Mitch T. Wolf, WOLFE, and check out my work on Eagle Insider. We're going to have a lot of articles coming out in the next few days. Statistical review. We've had defensive performance review. I'll have the offensive performance review. Then obviously we'll be starting to preview Virginia Tech. Going to have a quick turnaround. Luckily, don't have to watch BC game, but I'll have to watch a few Virginia Tech games to get a feel for them. And yeah, that I think we've get in the second half of the season and hope things get better.
All right. And you can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Again, I'm the publisher of Eagle Insider. We have right now, if you're listening to this on Friday, a new deal, 50% off at Eagle Insider. It's our basketball and hockey kickoff, puck drop, tip off, whatever you want to call it. As we get ready, I've got 2 basketball writers coming on. Jeremy Trottier is one of them, and I have another guy who wrote for the Heights. So we're going to have basketball coverage, and of course we have BC Hockey Blogger, and you know how good he is with the hockey coverage. Come on over. You can sign up for basically the cost of a cup of coffee, get all your VIP info, get Mitch's film review, get a whole bunch more. Come over to Eagle Insider today. Make sure you sign up. Links in the show notes. Thank you all for listening to Locked On Boston College. We'll be back again on Monday for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.